scripture reading today comes from Genesis, and this is our second week of a sermon series on creation. And I've been really just humbled by the ways in which each day of the creation story really speaks into how we're being rebirthed as a culture in this time. Genesis chapter 1, 6 through 8 reads, "And God said, 'Let there be a dome in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters.' So God made the dome and separated the waters that were under the dome from the waters that were above the dome. And it was so. God called the dome sky, and there was evening and there was morning, the second day."
Foundation, you saints of our God, is laid for your faith in His excellent word. What more can He say than to you He has said, to you forever? Our great Creator is with us.
little bit of a breeze today. Enough to blow papers around efficiently. I want to start with a quote from Andorran's sequel to Carl Sagan's Cosmos. Some scientists think life first took hold in the rocks, but from day one, life was an escape artist, always wanting to break free to conquer new worlds. Even the great big oceans couldn't contain it. Last week we witnessed the dawn of creation with the rising of our human awareness as God pushed back the darkness so that light might have space to make way for life. This week, in the witness of God's words and deeds during the second day of the creation story, we feel the pulling apart of the waters to give room for life to move, breathe, and become. Like a mother preparing a nursery for the child still in her womb, God prepares a room for life to be present, surrounded by all the resources that will one day sustain mammalian life. It is easy to forget, or perhaps to never even learn, that this space between waters prepared for mammalian life came at a cost to all that existed before our arrival. A radical evolutionary pattern triggered by what scientists call the oxygen apocalypse. The rise of conditions making mammalian life possible was disastrous for nearly all other life on Earth. The entrance of oxygen into the story of creation was experienced not as a gift, but as a poison that shifted and almost destroyed the entire planet. It took the planet a couple of 100 million years to figure out how to manage the production and processing of this new element. An element that 2.2 billion years later has become essential for sustaining all life on Earth. As residents of Colorado, most of us have either personally or secondarily had experiences that remind us of the importance of oxygen and the ability to sustain our human lives. When I moved from upstate New York to Colorado in 1993, my father was so eager to expose me to the beauty of our new home state that he drove me to see the breathtaking scene at the top of Pikes Peak on my second day in the Mile High City. Pikes Peak, as you probably know, is the highest summit of the southern Front Range of the Rocky Mountains in North America. And while there is less oxygen in Denver than there was in Binghamton, New York, there is even less oxygen at Pikes Peak than there is in the city of Denver. My body communicated the difference to me through 24 hours of a high fever, double ear infections, a sore throat, and vomiting. Even my daughter, who was born in Denver, gets a migraine and throws up on her second or third night spent at a higher altitude. For many of us, it takes little more than a trip uphill to regain perspective that our lives are dependent on a deeply interconnected ecosystem, creating room for us to breathe, to stay alive. The invitation held in Genesis retelling of the divine preparation taking place over the course of the second day points towards a corporate empathy for communities exiled by oppressive systems into environments causing faint, chronic breathlessness. It is a window toward understanding and an invitation to move beyond the awareness that I need oxygen to an acceptance that we all need and deserve an environment in which we can move, breathe, and become. This level of acceptance of our physical interdependency and our corporate fragility requires a commitment to socially locate ourselves in the roots of a creative story. It is a pulling apart and a settling into a creative story that has been so twisted and distorted from its original intent that we struggle to understand that what this space is, the space that we speak of, is also the place in which we reside. This holy space created in Genesis 1:6-8 is our home. This scientific story through which all of life was lost in the creation of what we require to survive is our place in history. Last weekend, I received an email from my daughter's school letting the parents know that there would be an opportunity for the students in her class to gather online to talk about the protest happening across the country in response to the devaluation of Black lives through systems perpetuating the oppression of marginalized populations. That last part was not in the email, but I wish it had been. What was actually in the email was far more predictable and politically correct. An assurance that this would in no way be a political discussion. This assurance was then followed by a promise that the facilitator would not offer opinions or engage in discussion regarding any elected official, past or present, but instead would fully rely on their qualifications as a scholar of history. I was fine with my daughter participating, but I'll be honest. The whole night before the online discussion, I was on edge. I am learning that any conversation that claims to be apolitical and strictly based on history is problematic. And that, I believe, is a generous statement. I will not pull my daughter from the school or email the facilitator about the conversation, but I will share with you all that I was right to be concerned. The pieces of the conversation I heard affirmed a deeper, unarticulated way of knowing that has been rising up in my soul. That there is and continues to be an extinction of safe space caused by a privileged position that there is an objective history from which we are somehow exempt from social placement and participation. In an effort to create a safe space above a traumatic, real-time narrative, white children are being taught how to hide out above the lives and experiences of brown and Black children. Birthed into the myth of objectivity, children of privilege are following a map leading to a space safe only for a single story that is not even allowed to be their own. It is a space from which they learn that their engagement with systems of injustice must be contained into a narrow tower visible only through tiny windows. From the security of this space, they can look down upon and distance themselves from their placement and purpose in a community which promises the resurrection of true belonging. Safe space, as defined as a space in which all beings have access to that which sustains life, and to equal opportunities to participate in the protection and cultivation of that which sustains life, is only possible when a people have the courage and commitment to socially locate themselves in the story of a larger narrative. There is no objective historical narrative, but there are many subjective ancestral stories flooded with truth that promise to clear new paths towards societal transformation. I am not interested, nor am I willing, to invest in a way of knowing that is owned and marketed by a textbook redacted and designed to provide the powerful with the confidence of a secured future. I am, however, passionately committed to embodying the story of a created space swollen with good news. A room with expansive boundaries in which death and life cycle in a cosmic evolution that can be contained by nothing other than the light which overcomes darkness. This inherited room to breathe is gifted with a responsibility to move beyond our own constructed realities, yes, but it is also an innate declaration that we are fully socially located in and bound by this space. Objectivity is an illusion in which we claim to possess the power of a role that belongs only to the God of many names and one expression, Creator. I can't breathe is a symptom of a non-existent objectivity that has removed us from the story of creation and deflated the space where all people, where all of creation are placed as recipients of good news. Far from a conduit for good news, objectivity suggests that we have the privilege to choose who is worthy of having a place in the room, who matters enough to access clean air, who is struggling so much that we might stop standing on the necks of those categorized as disposable to allow them to catch their breath. Perhaps this time, even a moment more to hear their story speak. I am infuriated and impatient and terrified when I examine the number of spaces that have been filled with a poison so addictive we barely notice that it is killing us. And I long for a change that runs deeper than any political or economic decision could take us. I dream not of a singular political change with an established system, but of a planetary evolution co-opted by a God who continues the work of pushing back darkness and preparing safe spaces where all sentient beings can move, breathe, and become. I hold this as a centerpiece of the vision for the land. Its presence as preserved prairie in the midst of subdivisions and fracking sites is a symbol of our intention to reconnect ourselves with a promise deeper than progress or productivity. The process of being present with the weather as liturgy, the meadowlark as conversation partner, and the antelope as congregant offer terrain for a somatic, embodied healing and communal transformation. This week has been a difficult week for those of us who are connected to the community of the land. In many ways, the pandemic has fragmented us by disallowing us to safely gather every Saturday morning. And so we have found amazing ways to stay connected while we are physically apart, whether that is lighting a candle at 8 p.m. in our windows, or coming here to garden, or watching online, or joining in on Zoom for Wednesday morning discussions. We have been creative in our collective continuation of the mission of the land. But this only carries us so far in our grief. On Tuesday, I was called to the hospital to be present with our beloved Clea and her husband Tony as she experienced her last breath. And this was initiated by the removal of a ventilator, a machine that allows us to breathe when we are not strong enough to breathe on our own. And I think to myself, can this be the healing purpose of the land? To be a spiritual ventilator, that when we have gone too far, too fast, too high, or too long, that we might help each other regain our breath and rest in that which creation offers us to survive. I am curious and slightly concerned about what it will look like as we begin to gather back together, not simply for our physical safety, which I think that we can contain and plan for, but I wonder about the containment of our attention as the pandemic loses its space in news and as the protests become old stories that we no longer have the time for. As shops reopen and movie theaters start, as sports teams begin to gather again, where will the purpose and placement of a movement that has begun in this space go? Will we be able to contain our momentum? What will our priorities be? I encourage us to create space in the next weeks throughout the creation story to ask ourselves, what is the life we want to create after this pandemic? Because we have been given a space, we have been pushed into time out, and the earth has been able to rest, and so too our souls are invited to respond. What is the world we wish to return to?
God.